Welcome to this special Combine edition of the Steel Scorpion Sports Podcast. Coming at you live from rainy San Diego, I'm Jeff Miller.
From San Jose, I'm Mark Heflin. But Jeff, I thought this was our Oscar podcast. I thought we were here to discuss all the Oscar results and maybe even look forward to next year's Oscars.
Yes, we are. And by Oscars,
Okay.
I assume you mean the Combine for the NFL, plus the first mock draft posted on our site, and a little other NFL news.
Yeah, I guess we can do that. The Oscars are tonight. I guess we'll choose to ignore that.
The Oscars were tonight. I guess I chose to ignore
Hey,
that.
later.
I'm so focused on the Combine, I'm replaying the defensive linemen jiggling through their 40-yard dashes.
That is probably more funny than anything you would have seen on the Oscars.
Guaranteed. And it really is Oscar worthy. To watch Danny Shelton bob up and down as he's trying to make 40 yards, it's an impressive movie in and of itself.
Did he run faster than Jameis Winston? Because Winston was glacially slow among QBs.
Unfortunately for Danny Shelton, as we'll find out later, he did not run faster than Rich Eisen.
Really?
Sure
about that?
I'm just kidding. I believe he actually could outrun Rich Eisen, but it's unfair. Rich is in a suit in wingtips. I mean, the fact that he even breaks, what does he break, like 8 seconds? That's impressive for a 50-year-old guy in a suit.
I suppose so. Yeah. I've always been tempted. I want to get on the track and put some shoes on and time myself and just see where it is, and then never tell anyone ever.
Well, you may have already done that, and I wouldn't know because you wouldn't tell us.
Well, if I broke 6, I suppose I would tell people, but otherwise I would just keep it to myself.
There you go. But before we get to more in-depth analysis of the Combine and the large men running in shorts and T-shirts and people throwing in shorts and T-shirts and people doing interviews in shorts and T-shirts, and before I let you break down the first mock draft I've posted on SteelScorpionSports.com on the blogs tab, so everybody should go out and check that out. It's the Millman Mock 1.1. Before we get to any of that, Mark, there is a little NFL news I wanted to touch on, mainly because it actually directly impacts you and I in a strange way. It was announced on Thursday into Friday that the Chargers and Raiders have sort of made a secret agreement that is no longer secret about sharing a stadium in Carson, California, and splitting the costs, privately funding it, and then both of them moving up to LA. This is on the heels of the Rams owner, Stan Kroenke, announcing that he'd bought some land out by Hollywood Park, and that's near Inglewood for those that don't know the LA area that well, and he was looking to, build a stadium and mixed entertainment complex there. And that follows the Phil Anschutz team that near downtown LA was going to build that mixed use complex. Farmers Field, I believe it already had a name, but didn't have a team. So, Mark, what do you make of all this LA noise, especially as it relates to your Oakland Raiders and my San Diego Chargers? And I say that in proximity only.
Yes, I refuse to take any ownership over the Raiders. But of those three, obviously the one that doesn't have a team attached would have to be in third place, I would think, because it turns out that if you're going to build a stadium, you might actually want a team that plays football in it. The Rams, I think, are probably one of the better options, both stadium-wise and solid ownership-wise, and the fact that they've actually already been in LA before, and then also just geographically-wise, the Rams are in the NFC West, and yet they're clearly the most eastern team of that division, and yet if you move them from middle of the country, St. Louis, to Los Angeles, then all of a sudden that division makes a lot more sense with those four teams being in Phoenix, LA, San Francisco, Seattle. So I think that one kind of makes sense from the NFL-wise. And from a fan standpoint, I like the current structure that we have with the 8 divisions of 4 teams. And then most of the divisions would be pretty geographically sound, although our AFC South would be probably less place among the 8 divisions as far as geography, with Indianapolis and Tennessee being fairly close together, but then Houston, Texas, and Jacksonville, Florida, so quite a wide range there. And then Oakland, San Diego, being both in the same division, and the potential that, one of those teams might have to move to a different division because it would be pretty difficult for 2 teams in the same division to use the same stadium every year.
Yeah, so I've already read some articles and heard some of the talk down here in San Diego that said if that were to be the case, they've already, apparently had some high-level discussions with the NFL, but the thought was if Oakland and San Diego shared a stadium up in the LA area, one of them would flip from the AFC West to the NFC West, which does lead to the question of which team would you flip back. And I have to say flip back because I assume it would be Seattle, whose long and storied history in the NFC dates back 12 or 14 years. So, it would make the most sense, although given the rivalries that they've established with San Francisco, to an extent Arizona, not as much St. Louis, I would imagine they're not keen on that, but there is footage of Seattle having games with Kansas City and Denver and Oakland and San Diego as division rivals before, so at least you'd have that where in our lifetime they actually were AFC West rivals. So I think that would be the team you'd have to pick, right?
I think so, for all the reasons that you just mentioned, but it would also be a little bit weird to move a team that just so recently won a Super Bowl for the NFC and then shifting them back to the AFC. And this would have been even harder a year or two ago because, a year or two ago people were saying that the Seahawks-Niners were probably the best rivalry in all of football. So to move one of those teams to the conference and completely break up that rivalry would have been pretty crazy. But now, with Harbaugh gone and Jim Tomsula, or Tim, whatever his name is, what's his name? Jim Tomsula?
Tomasulu? Yeah, something. The new coach of the Niners, yes.
And he's local, and he's a joke. He gets made fun of all the time. He's in other interviews with people. I should probably learn what his first name is, but Tomsula. Now, you could pretty easily see the 49ers kind of going into a decline, and that rivalry, even this year, it wasn't nearly as big of a rivalry, and people looked forward to the games, but Seattle handled the Niners fairly easily in both games. So now I would say that, yes, it probably would make the most sense for those reasons you mentioned.
Then on the flip side of that, though, we both live in California. We know the political climate, the building climate, the taxpayer climate. Of these 3, do you think any of them break ground in the next year or 2, and do any of them have a team attached? Do we really get a team in LA, or is this just posturing by Stan Kroenke to get St. Louis to give him a better deal in St. Louis, for the Spanos family to get a better deal in San Diego, and for the Davis family to get a better deal in Oakland?
Yeah, all of those are very real possibilities. We've seen it before. I mean, just like a few years ago, the Vikings were discussed and considered as one of the prime candidates to move to LA. And now look what they have. They have a bright, shiny new stadium that opens in 2016, I believe. They played at the Minnesota Gopher Stadium this year, and then I think for the 2015 season as well, that stadium opens in 2016. And it's, from all the pictures and renderings that I've seen, it's going to be one of the top stadiums in the NFL. So we've seen it work before, but as you mentioned, in California, it's probably much harder to get taxpayer money for a stadium. I imagine it might be a little bit easier if you can say that, look, we're going to get 2 teams playing in a stadium, because then, obviously, if you have 2 teams rotating in one stadium, you're going to have a home game basically every week of the season instead of half the weeks of the season. So maybe there's some possibility for that. And then, we'll see with the Rams. I think the Rams situation probably has the best potential real estate and the best spot. But then again, they've been in St. Louis for quite a while now, and maybe he is using that to gain leverage in St. Louis.
Yeah, and for those not familiar with Carson, California, it is not what you see in the movies for Los Angeles, California. It's a little bit different. It's a little industrial, a little closer to Long Beach, not palm trees, movie stars, and high class stores. That's not Carson, California. So that would actually fit the Raiders fan base well.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, well that was the big news item that came out of the NFL over the past couple weeks. So did want to give us a chance to discuss that, Mark, since again it impacts both of our markets directly. I will say if the Chargers are going to move, I'm more than happy if they move soon, so that I don't have blackouts on local TV anymore. So that'll be exciting. Although I tend to just watch Red Zone and other things anyway, but seriously, if they can move sooner than later, I don't even risk blackouts next season. That's great.
And they need to either move or get a new stadium, one of the two, because, you and I went to that Colts Chargers game, what was that, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and that Qualcomm is a dump. I mean, I don't know what year that was built, I'm assuming a long time ago. They need something different, that is for sure.
Yes, it was built in 1967 as Jack Murphy Stadium. And to let you know, Jack Murphy was a sports writer. So back then you didn't sell your naming rights for millions of dollars. You apparently named it after local beloved figures. That tells you how long ago it was. You didn't get money for your stadium. You gave respect, which clearly is not what the NFL's after now.
No, they're looking for, who will pay us as many millions as possible per season to change their stadium name from, I remember, growing up in Indianapolis when it went from the Hoosier Dome to the RCA Dome. So.
Yes, the naming rights invention, whichever team came up with that first, and I don't recall anymore, that was a great ploy, and the NFL has made hundreds of millions, if not a billion, over the course of naming rights since then. So good job, teams. Way to look out for the fan. But that's enough with the stadium news and the team news, because there are a couple other things we really need to talk about, and we want to keep this podcast rather short since it's not a game breakdown podcast. So, Mark, I posted the first official Steel Scorpion Sports mock draft, the Millman Mock 1.1, out on the site. So for those that are following along, you can go out to steelscorpionsports.com, click on the blogs tab. You'll be able to find that, read through. You can make fun of me all you want. I will put a couple disclaimers out there right now. I did this pre-combine, and obviously it's pre-free agency. So one of the hard things I found as I was going through this, and I now sympathize with mock drafters everywhere, it's rather difficult to identify early on in the process in a January, February timeframe what teams might be looking at when you don't even know which players are going to be on the team, who free agency-wise they'll bring in and who they'll lose. And also, when the players, all you have is the college game tape to go from and not really any of these measurables, which I try not to let them influence me too much, but I'm sure some of them will influence draft positions coming up in our future mocks. So, Mark, have at it. You've seen my mock. You've analyzed it to, I'm sure, no end, and I'm sure you have no arguments with any of my choices, right?
Well, I do have some questions on some of your picks here, but
what?
Before I even go there, I have to bust your chops a little bit. How did you come up with the naming convention of 1.1 for your first one? Like I usually see 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and then occasionally 3.1 if there's a small slight adjustment or something like that. Why did you decide to go with 1.1? So is your next one going to be 2.0, which throws off your number convention, or is it going to be 1.2, 1.3? And if that's the case, why wasn't this 1.0?
Actually, there was a 1.0. It was the one I tried to upload a week ago, and I was not successful in my technological advancements of the Mac to be able to get that to load. And then I subsequently made changes in the week after.
I see.
And so I didn't feel like it was fair to say it was 1.0 because there really was one I had before that had a couple differences. So I felt like, being completely honest, this is 1.1. It is the first, but I made a couple edits.
Okay, so then your next one will be 2.0.
It would be 2.0.
Very confused.
it'll confuse people, but I will put a disclaimer out there as to why.
Well, I'll probably post my first one next week, and I'm going to say it's the mock draft 3.04, just to just to really mess with people's heads.
Well, I'll just follow along, and I'll be 4.2 after you.
All right, so looking at your picks, I think I don't really have any objections with any of the first three. You've got Winston and defense. The Titans, Jags do need that. Oakland at number 4, you have Amari Cooper, which is pretty common. I've seen that in many other mock drafts as well, and I do agree that they need a receiver because the receiving core is fairly weak right now, and you want to get Derek Carr a weapon. And I think maybe pre-combine, like you said, you put this together pre-combine, I think I would have maybe put this, but Kevin White was mentioned as a possibility that a receiver that might rise up the draft boards, and he already had a great season in West Virginia, over 100 catches, 13 or 1,400 yards, a bunch of touchdowns. But then he went to the combine, looked great on his routes, and ran way faster than anyone expected. He ran a 4.35, and I think that's going to move him up the boards. I think there's a distinct possibility that he actually goes at number 4 to Oakland. We've seen Oakland make some other receiving picks that weren't as expected. They picked Darius Hayward-Bay over Michael Crabtree. Picking White over Cooper would not be the same shock that DHB over Crabtree was. I think Cooper has a much higher floor than White does, but I think if you look at everything, I think that Kevin White has a potentially higher ceiling than Amari Cooper does, and I think that's the direction Oakland will head.
That is crazy, though, because if you think about Cooper, I know he didn't run great at the combine from a 40-yard dash time, but he runs really good routes. And think back to when he was playing against SEC defenses. He's really the only option in the passing game, so you knew that's who you had to take away. Yet nobody could ever seem to take him away, so I have to believe he's got some talent there. White was on an interesting offense. They're a little more wide open than Alabama at West Virginia, and he's in the Big 12. I'm still confused by West Virginia being in the Big 12 with 10 teams. And I believe the Big 12's defenses weren't notoriously good the last couple of years. So this year, he put up the 100 catches. He put up great measurables at the combine. I don't argue any of that. I don't argue that he probably is creeping up, and he and Cooper probably are neck and neck for that top receiver pick. I'm just baffled when we see things like this, where you go into the combine and you probably have Cooper clearly number 1. White's probably number 2, but in the mock draft order, you probably have Cooper going 4 and White going maybe, towards the 10th pick. And now you're going to flip-flop them? It just always seems crazy to me that we let a 40-yard dash and how awesome a guy looks in shorts and a T-shirt do that to us.
Yeah, we've seen it before, and teams end up regretting it. I just think that, I don't know, I have a feeling that's the way that Oakland would go. Kevin White is a very physical receiver. I have no problems with Amari Cooper. I don't disagree with anything in what you said. Not only is he a great talent, but from things that I've seen and read, that he has an amazing work ethic. And like I said, I think he easily has the highest floor of any of the wide receivers in this draft. I think there's a very, very, very small chance that Amari Cooper is a bust. I think at the very least he'll be a productive wide receiver in the NFL for 10 years. But if teams think that Kevin White has a higher ceiling and they look at potential, that crazy word that we always hear around draft time being so important, then at number 4, Oakland may decide to go that way. So we'll see.
Did you say Amari Cooper was also a good person? Did I hear that about him?
Yes.
Okay, well then I completely want to change my mind and agree with you. He wouldn't fit in Oakland at all. So they need to cross him off the board, go with the faster guy who might, you can't take the quiet, humble, good guy in the community to go to Oakland. That doesn't make any sense, so I apologize for making that pick.
Exactly. And, of course, Al Davis is no longer there, but we know how much he loves speed. That was the primary reason that he picked PHP over Crabtree. And we know that White ran faster than Cooper. So even though Al Davis is no longer there, probably some of his philosophies are probably still very revered in the offices in Oakland. So that could be another reason that White goes ahead of Cooper.
Okay, so the ghost of Al Davis will help model that. Well, maybe next draft in a couple weeks when I do my second, I will update and take into account the Oakland factor.
Yes. Looking through the next few picks, you have Mariota at 6 to the Jets, which, again, is one of those picks that is, pretty common. Like, the early mock drafts, the ones that came out pretty much as soon as the NFL season was over back in late December, early January, a lot of them back then had Mariota to Tampa Bay and Winston maybe even to, Tennessee at 2 or the Jets at 6. Now, of course, everyone's saying that it looks like Tampa Bay is leaning towards Winston, and now a lot of them are having Mariota to the Jets at 6. To me, it's almost one of those picks where, if you look at mock drafts, even a month or a week before the draft, and you see that, like, it's almost 100% consensus. You see, like, almost every mock draft has one guy going to a specific team. When I see that, I almost say, okay, there's no way it's going to happen now. If everyone is saying that this guy's going to go to this team, it rarely ever happens. And I have this same feeling with Mariota. I think it's just too much of a consensus of Mariota going to the Jets that it's not going to happen.
I'm not 100% sold on it, but I needed a landing place for Mariota, so the Jets make some sense. The GM there isn't tied into the Geno Smith pick. The coach isn't. Maybe they look at, Mariota's stock and they fall in love with him. Although I will say, after, again, my mock pre-combine, seeing Mariota speak at the combine, he's not going to be great with the media. So in New York, I know that shouldn't be a factor with taking a player, because how he is with the media is not going to impact how he is on the field, you would hope. But it is something you worry about probably in New York, because you want a guy, the face of your franchise, that can really help sell tickets and generate buzz around you, especially in New York where you have the Giants down the street, or actually I should say across the field in their locker room, that you have to compete with all the time. So I'm not 100% sold on that, but I did need a landing place for him. I think we'll find out more in the coming weeks, and you and I obviously will continue updating our mocks. But if we see something like this where Mariota falls towards the Jets, another thing we don't do in our mocks is predict trades. But I would definitely think, Mark, that if he starts sliding and he gets to 6, there are teams that are a little lower that might need a QB, say Cleveland with 2 first-round picks. Maybe the Jets would be okay with sliding down a bit and taking 2 firsts to let somebody else grab him. Or maybe, if he gets past the Jets and he starts sliding towards 10, could Philly somehow make a jump up? I don't see how it works, but, those are things we aren't predicting in this, but in reality, I could see a number of things happening with him.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. I think we could see trade potential for whatever team ends up picking Mariota. The Jets have a new head coach who is defensive oriented, so there's a possibility that they could take a defensive player there. And then also, as you mentioned in your mock draft, one of their needs is wide receiver. They signed Eric Decker. He's a decent receiver, but if Oakland does end up taking Kevin White and Amari Cooper is still there at number 6, then it could be quite possible that the Jets take Amari Cooper there and then maybe give Geno Smith 1 year. It was okay. Here, we got you a Heisman contending wide receiver, which you don't see very often. And if you can't make it work with Amari Cooper, then we'll take a quarterback next year. Or maybe they take Amari Cooper at number 6 and then try to trade back in the bottom of the first, or use their second round pick on a QB that slides. Maybe they think Huntley or Petty or Grayson is the answer. We'll see. But it'll be interesting to see how that pick goes at number 6. I think that could be one of the key turning points in the draft. And then my next question for you is at number 10, you had St. Louis taking Andrews Peak, offensive tackle out of Stanford. They used their first round pick last year, well, they had 2 last year, but they used one of them on Greg Robinson, who is also an offensive tackle. They could potentially go that way, but I think they're another team that might need wide receiver. They don't have a very good wide receiver core. Whoever the QB is next year, whether it's Sam Bradford or a free agent from the street or someone to take in the second round, they need a better wide receiving core. Right now they've got Kenny Brett, Brian Quick, Taylor Austin hasn't been the answer. So I think they're another potential landing spot for a wide receiver. And this is, like last year, a deep draft for wide receiver. Even if White goes to Oakland, even if Cooper then goes to the Jets, Devontae Parker is another a very good wide receiver, he could potentially go to St. Louis at 10.
Yeah, and I only had him going a little after the 10th pick, as you probably read. But no, I just don't see Jeff Fisher as being a wide receiver first round guy. And again, I think they do have Stedman Bailey, they do have Tavon Austin, they do have Quick, they do have, Kenny Britt. They have a number of players that play wide receiver, and I agree, none of them are great. They did show some improvement in the passing game this year. I think their biggest problem is they don't have a quarterback. So what does it matter if I get you a good wide receiver? If I'm trotting out guys like Austin Davis at quarterback, I'm not winning in the NFL anyway. So I think the Jeff Fisher approach is more, I want to be able to run the ball and protect whoever I drop back there at quarterback. So locking up another offensive lineman seemed like the way that he would like to go. The one place I don't think they could go is defensive line. They were so stacked, and they actually still are at defensive line. That would not make any sense. Corner, if there was a good enough corner, I could see them going that route. But I mean, they have a number of needs, which is why they're picking again in the top 10.
This is true. My next question for you is Cleveland. They have 2 picks, 12 and 19, and you mentioned wide receiver and potentially QB being positions of need, and yet your picks were offensive tackle and defensive end. Is that more just kind of based on how you saw the drafts going, and just not the right players falling to them there?
Yes and no. Yes, because the right players didn't fall, and so I think Cleveland's the type of team that doesn't think through the draft very well, and their GM has gone on record as saying he doesn't like drafting wide receivers in the first round. So I think what's going to happen, and that's what I've projected here, is they don't grab a wide receiver with the first pick. But by the time it gets back around to them, they realize there aren't really the great receivers left. There'll be a mini run and here or there, and suddenly they're like, I don't love any of these guys. I'll wait till the second round, and that's what they'll do. And so they'll end up trying to strengthen the offense, strengthen the defense. I just feel like that's what Cleveland does. And from the quarterback perspective, I think if a quarterback were there for them, they'd be ecstatic, but I don't see the top 2 falling, and there's no way you take any of those quarterbacks you mentioned, like Hundley or Petty, in the middle of the first round. I mean, if anything, you're trading out then. You're trading back to get near the tail end of the first round or early in the second round and get those guys. So the QB just doesn't work for them where they're drafting. And the wide receiver, unless something strange happens and it falls to them right, I see them passing it, and then they're out of luck.
Okay. And then at 13, you have Vic Beasley, which would be a great pick for the Saints. Though with the combine results they had today, he had a great vertical and a very good 40-yard dash. I think we'll end up seeing him in the top 10, maybe even in the top 7 or 8. But we'll see how that goes. Then you have 18 for the Chiefs. You have them taking Jalen Strong. Like I said, part of the strong wide receiver class. He's the 4th wide receiver at pick number 18. Clearly an area of need if they had 0 touchdowns for wide receivers into this 14. And they may not have had Dwayne Bowe back next year. So that is a very strong possibility there. One thing I want to mention there, I thought it was funny. I was watching some of the combine on Saturday, and they have different position coaches from different teams that are helping the players run through some of the drills. And for all the wide receivers, they have the wide receiver coach from the Kansas City Chiefs running them through their drills, which I thought was quite funny, given the fact that they had, one of, if not the worst wide receiver quarters in NFL history. And I'm thinking, if I was some of these wide receivers from college, and this guy has told me to look at these drills, I would seriously question him and be like, why are you here? What is your qualification for being here? Because your wide receiving core sucked.
So wait, were the drills that the wide receivers did mostly blocking and dropping passes in the end zone? Did they practice? Did they practice coming up 1 or 2 yards short of the end zone? I kid because I care, Kansas City. I kid because I care. And you mentioned that the Chiefs could lose Dwayne Bowe, but is that really a loss if you had 0 touchdowns from your wide receivers last year?
It's really not. He's washed up at this point. I think they'd rather just take his money off the books and move on.
Yeah. Now I did want to give them a receiver because I think it makes a lot of sense. Although I will say, this is an Andy Reid coach team, right? I remember
Yeah.
Andy Reid in Philly never seemed to want to take the skill position guys in the first round. For whatever reason, he was a build from the lines out. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't take a wide receiver. They there'll be an offensive or defensive lineman there that and Andy Reid will say, well, that'll help us out, and we'll get a receiver later. And I could see him passing again, and you would just be baffled. You'll be like, wow, you have 0 touchdowns from your receivers, and you address it by not adding any and losing Dwayne Bowe. It'll just baffle me, but I won't be surprised.
Yeah, no, that's quite possible because people said they should have taken a wide receiver last year. That was one of the big needs going into the draft last year, and Kelvin Benjamin was sitting there for the first round pick, and instead they took D Ford, who basically redshirted. He pretty much never saw the field last year, which they kind of even knew might be a possibility. But now with some of their free agents this year, there's a chance that D Ford will get on the field next year. But if they do the same thing this year, if they pass up, if they don't take a wide receiver and then Jalen Strong goes a pick or two later and has a great rookie season, again, people are going to say, why are you not addressing this position?
Yeah, there were 2 teams last year that I remember in the draft thinking, wow, they really need wide receivers. Well, 3. One was Cleveland, because we knew Josh Gordon was going to be suspended last year. Or we thought he was, because he'd already failed a test in the offseason, had the DUI, and they didn't address it. Then we thought, okay, well, then clearly Kansas City, because they need it, they didn't address it. The only one that did was actually Carolina, who basically got rid of, what was it, their top 18 receivers or pass catchers from the year before. And they got Kelvin Benjamin. So it worked out for one team. Maybe the other team should take a page out of that playbook and this year maybe draft a wide receiver early.
They should indeed. Going back to your mock draft, I don't have a lot of questions from kind of the middle towards the late of the first round. And then at 31, you have Seattle taking Devin Funchess. That's the 5th wide receiver that you have in round 1. And then at 32, you have New England to get Max Williams, the one and only first-round tight end that you have, in this case, out of Minnesota. Can you just tell me a little bit about your reasoning for those 2 picks?
Well, both of them had to do with having weapons for their QBs. We'll start with Seattle. They didn't have good enough weapons, especially in the red zone. Their offense is predicated on Marshawn Lynch, and then they have small wide receivers. Unless you truly believe that a guy whose first ever catch was in the Super Bowl is going to turn it on for next season, which maybe you're counting on that. But, Richardson injured himself near the end of the season for Seattle. They don't have a lot of weapons for Russell Wilson to throw to. Having a big-bodied guy I thought would make sense. Now, I will say, again, pre-combine, post-combine, I believe someone didn't run very well and didn't bench press very well, so he's not fast enough to go on the outside, not strong enough to go in line. So Devin, that wasn't a very good performance. On the flip side, for my pick that New England of getting Max Williams, I now want to revise that and say there's no way New England's getting Max Williams. And not because I don't think he's going to the first round. He ran so well, performed in the drills so well apparently, that not only do I think he's going in the first round, but he'll probably go earlier than that. The reason I had him going from Minnesota to New England was they are so Gronk dependent. We've seen that in the past. What stopped them the last couple of years prior to this from getting to the Super Bowl or winning the Super Bowl? It was Gronk injuries. If they don't have a healthy Gronk, their offense was not nearly as effective. So when they had a Aaron Hernandez-Gronk combo, they were probably at their most lethal in the last 4 or 5 years. So that's what I was looking at there for New England. But I don't think it's going to happen now because, honestly, I think Williams did himself some good justice here, and he's probably moving up the board.
So I was already kind of thinking about my mock draft, which I'll probably post either later this week or early next week. And I was thinking, for New England, I was kind of thinking that they're going to rely on Aaron Hernandez getting cleared and found innocent in his jury trial and re-signing him. Do you think that's a bad assumption then? I shouldn't go that way?
No, I think now it's a fine assumption because if Max Williams isn't there, there really isn't another tight end to take, so they'll go with that angle. That seems like a good play. I mean, maybe they could, and I don't want to make this sound trivial with a murder trial, but maybe they could deflate the evidence or something, and I'm sure they could take some of the air out of that courtroom and hope that he gets off.
That might be part of their 2015 strategy. The one last question I had on your mock draft is, I did not see Todd Gurley or Melvin Gordon, so I'm wondering, did I read through and too quickly and not see them? Where should I look to find them? I missed them.
Well, I have a quick question for you. What running back went in the first round last year?
That big guy called Nobody.
No first round running backs last year. I do think we'll potentially see a first round running back, although after the combine performances, which we'll talk about in a minute, maybe not. I didn't want to put Gurley in there, especially as the combine was approaching and you have no idea how his knee situation is, and you know that they're going to do the medical tests there, so that's probably the biggest thing for him because he wasn't going to be able to do anything else, right? So didn't want to put Gurley in the first round yet until I know more about his knee. Gordon, I couldn't find a landing spot for. I kept looking at it and thinking, oh, could Dallas take him? It's possible, but in my mind, would they not also rather have DeMarco Murray back? Well, of course they would. So if Murray leaves, could they take him? Post free agency, I could easily see that happening. Could the Colts go that route? Maybe, but I think the Colts' bigger problem is they can't stop opponents. They have luck. They put up enough points most games to win. They need to be able to stop people and get the ball back to luck. So, I thought, yes, could Gordon go somewhere from, actually anywhere from like 20, 22 on? Yeah, maybe. Every time I looked to pencil him in, couldn't find a spot. And I'm afraid, now that he didn't run that great of a time in the combine, that it's going to be equally hard for me going forward until after free agency to move any running back in, because right now, given the choice, I look at running back as a commodity like most NFL teams. Why would I waste my first round pick on Gordon, even though he might be a 3-down back, when, I can get a guy that's a 2-down back or nearly as comparable in the second round. I mean, these guys are interchangeable is what they're trying to tell us, so we'll see. And hey, maybe in free agency I could sign Adrian Peterson. You never know.
True. And you said Gurley couldn't do anything in the combine, but I'm pretty sure you can take a wonder-look exam with an injured knee.
I think he claimed injury and was unable to do that and do the interviews. He said he was in too much pain to do the interviews. Pretty sure that was his strategy. Now, I did hear, though, that he didn't even let them touch him for the physical. So I was wrong about the medical.
Yeah,
I thought the medical was going to happen, but I guess at most they maybe scanned his knee. But since he's, I think, 12 to 14 weeks out of ACL surgery, that it's at a point where you shouldn't have people moving it around. Although I'll say, I woke up after my ACL surgery, and there was some little man in there bending my knee. And if I could have reached him, I'd be in jail right now for murder. But so having, I get it wasn't the tugging and the pulling and this and that, but they touched it. Believe me, they have to get flexion back in it, so they're bending it. So I'm a little skeptical when they say that he couldn't allow anyone to touch it. I get you shouldn't have people tugging at it and pulling it in different directions because it's not ready for that, but you could easily have them bending it and other things. So I don't know.
Mike Mayock was saying that Gurley didn't want 32 team doctors poking at his knee, which I completely understand. But I don't understand why they would then need to have 32 different team doctors, touching his knee anyway. I don't understand why he couldn't have one NFL doctor examining his knee while 32 teams looked on. But I guess the teams are looking at this as a major investment. They want their specific doctor to look at a guy, but I guess now they'll have to do that at his pro day or closer to the draft if they think that he's the option for them.
Right. And again, do I think a running back could go in the first round? Definitely. I'm not 100% sold on it after the combine results, but we'll see. Maybe both Gordon and Gurley go. Maybe neither. Maybe one. At this point, until free agency happens and until we get more, the combine results get digested, I didn't find a spot to land a running back, and I'm sure you will, and I'm sure a pick around, say, where the Colts are drafting would probably at 29 be somewhere you're landing a running back.
Well, I will say that my mock draft most likely will have at least one running back in the first round. I know we haven't had any in the last 2 years, but I think Gordon and Gurley are better prospects than we've seen in the last couple of years. From some of the other mock drafts I've already seen, I haven't seen any running backs in the top 22. Starting at 23, I've seen some people saying that Detroit might want a running back because Reggie Bush will probably be gone. Arizona might want a running back because Andre Ellington, let's face it, is not a kind of strong three-down back. He's kind of a lighter guy. Baltimore, Forsett is a free agent. They might want a running back. The Cowboys at 27, if they did lose DeMarco Murray, they might want a running back. The Colts, obviously, are a candidate at 29. And then Seattle at 31 is a possibility if Marshawn Lynch is not returning.
Yeah, all of those are possibilities, but you did mention a lot of places where you said so-and-so's a free agent or so-and-so, they're not sure if they'll re-sign. So it's really tough, as I've noted a number of times, and you'll see as you do your mock next week. It's tough when you don't know the outcome of free agency to really mock it accurately, because if you put one in now and say, well, the Cowboys are going to take Gordon, and then they re-sign DeMarco Murray, well, of course you're changing that, so you were wrong. So on the flip side, if they lose DeMarco Murray, mocking Gordon probably looks really good.
Yeah, I hear you.
So I think these will be fluid, as they should be, up until you and I lock ours down the week before the draft or the week of the draft, prior to the draft Thursday. And then we'll see how we do. But between now and then, there are going to be so many things that change with rumors, innuendo from the combine on through free agency to smoke screens thrown out by teams and agents. It'll be all sorts of fun.
Yeah.
But that was a good breakdown of my mock, so I'm glad that you at least took the time to read it, so thank you, Mark. And I think we touched on the combine, but I did want to talk about a couple things in particular from the combine before we sign off. So first, I was terribly excited this year at the combine. Do you know why, Mark? Do you know why? That's right. It's because the top picks at the quarterback position actually threw at the combine. I don't recall the last time quarterbacks that knew they were going to go in the first round, and most likely one of you is going first and the other's probably going to the top 10. I don't remember a time when those quarterbacks actually showed up and threw the ball. So kudos to Winston and Mariota for actually showing up and doing what quarterbacks do, going through the drills. And to be honest, Winston looked great, as many people thought he would. So after that little shoulder scan, weak arm thing that came out from the medical, he definitely, I think, put that to rest. And the other thing I took away was running backs in this year's class are not fast. They're like offensive linemen fast. That's not good.
Yeah, it's not good. We had one guy, and I don't think anyone would have predicted pre-combine that Jeremy Langford would have been the fastest running back, but he was by it's not a huge margin, but when you look at it from hundreds of decimal point, but as far as 40-yard dashes go, he was 6/100 faster than the next closest guy, which is a pretty big margin. And so he was at 4.42. Nobody else was faster than 4.48.
Yeah, when you're a half second faster, that's pretty impressive. Or not half second, sorry, a half of a tenth of a second.
Right.
But still, that's pretty impressive for a guy that only I predicted was going to be the fastest runner of the running backs at the combine.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
I'll record it quickly and then I'll place it in the archive.
But most people were thinking that Duke Johnson was going to be the fastest. He was actually the 8th fastest at 4.54. He was slower than people were thinking he would be.
Yeah, again, not terribly impressive, the running back class, from a pure speed standpoint. Now, there's still some really good quality players in there, and you can check their college film to see that. But from a speed standpoint, nothing terribly exciting. And for the quarterbacks, great job throwing the ball. Beyond that, I don't know. You already touched on a couple of the wide receivers. Looked good. I think Williams from the tight ends looked good. Offensive linemen, I just don't know what to look for. Honestly, they do reps, they show their hips, they move around great. But I did hear, the guys that I had mocked near the top, for the most part, looked pretty good. The one that didn't, I believe, was the tackle from Iowa. Didn't look as good as some people thought. Maybe, yeah, those things happen. So we'll see how the combine impacts offensive linemen, defensive linemen, same way. I think it'll be more impactful to the corners and maybe some of the linebackers. The speed at the linebacker position was actually pretty impressive because you mentioned Vic Beasley earlier. I believe Vic Beasley's 40 time was faster than Cam Newton and Colin Kaepernick. That's good, I think.
Yeah, no, he had a pretty good showing. And then, from a wide receiver standpoint, we mentioned Kevin White with his 4.35, some of the other big names. Amari Cooper ran a 4.42, which tied for seventh best. Devin Smith out of Ohio State, big play guy. He was actually, predicted to be one of the faster guys. He also ran a 4.42, which just tied for seventh best. Sammy Coates, people thought he would run a pretty good time. He ran a 4.43, which was 11th best among wide receivers. Jalen Strong ran a 4.44. And then Philip Dorsett at Miami was predicted to be the fastest guy. He himself said that he would run, or predicted that he'd run something in the 4.2s. He came kind of close. He ran a 4.33. Then the fastest guy was J.J. Nelson. He had a UAB. The UAB Blazer was the Blazer of the wide receivers. He ran a 4.28, which basically means you can completely drop him off of any of your fantasy draft lists for 2015, because if you look at the list of the top 10 fastest wide receiver times over the last 10 or 12 years, only one of them has any fantasy relevance, and that's Deshaun Jackson. You just get a bunch of fast, small guys that normally can impact in the NFL. And in fact, J.J. Nelson is 156 pounds. So don't expect to see any fantasy relevance from him.
No, I will not expect the 5'6", 130-pound guy to be fantasy relevant next year.
No, or at any point.
Yes, possibly ever. So but hey, good for him if that gets him drafted. Got to use what you got.
Yeah.
So anything else you wanted to highlight from the combine? I mean, I think we already touched on, some of the wide receivers, the running backs not being as impressive. I was impressed with the QBs. Anything from the defensive side of the ball that stuck out to you yet?
Beasley had a great combine, like you mentioned, and then Bud Dupree out of Kentucky had a pretty good showing. And then we're recording this on Sunday night. We still have one day left on Monday. I think the cornerbacks and safeties go. As far as 40-yard dashes, you typically see some pretty fast cornerbacks. I don't think any of this year's crop is going to come close to breaking Chris Johnson's 4.24, but we'll probably see a few in the 4.3s.
All right. Well, I did see that my man Shelton posted the slowest defensive lineman time, which I was very excited about because I mocked him 7th. But when you're a nose tackle who's more wide than agile and your job is to eat up blockers, I think running 40 yards probably isn't your strong suit anyway. And if you ever have to run 40 yards, our team's in trouble.
Yeah, I don't think a defensive lineman ever runs probably more than 5 to 10 yards on any given play.
Yeah, I think your goal is that they run, as you said, 5 yards, maybe 10 on a stretch play or something, because anything beyond that means either they're chasing someone down, which is never good for you, or on the off chance that there's a fumble or there's a quarterback that just keeps zigzagging his way away from the line of scrimmage, well, maybe then you have to run further. But yeah, I would think that your D-line probably not excited if they're running too much. Another player that did stand out to me, though, Mark, and I want you to quickly look up his 40 time for me, was Eric Armstead from Oregon. Now, I think he's a defensive end, and I anticipated him being pretty nimble. Oregon isn't heavy on the D-line usually. If I remember correctly, he did not run a very fast time, and he wasn't overly strong. from his reps. So that's a combination I'm not sure helps.
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now on NFL.com. It's only listing, I'm on the top performers. It's only listing the top 15 by position. And the 15th best ran a 4.88. So I can tell you he's ran something slower than that.
I believe it was over 5, and that would not be good, would it?
No.
So, all right, well, I think we'll have more fun for tomorrow for you to analyze the corners. I'll expect a full debrief on my desk mid-morning Tuesday.
Yes, well, maybe we should mention this. We didn't mention this, maybe just to make sure our listeners know. But NFL.com, on the 40-yard dash page, it does say smaller number is better. So, in case you weren't aware, this is like golf. The smaller number is better for 40 times. I'm not sure anyone that's actually reading this site is taking the time to go to NFL.com and look at 40 times. I'm not sure how any of them would not know that. But I did find it funny that they actually said that.
Wait, 5.5 isn't better than 4?
It turns out it's not.
Okay, well, that skews my entire mock. I'm going to have to redo it all. Darn you, NFL.com, for your smaller number is better. Wow, you would think they know their audience, but apparently they know their audience. Their audience must be really dumb.
Who's looking this up that doesn't already know that?
Well, good for them, if they did.
That's like, next year I expect to look at NFL box scores, and for the scores that have them say, higher number is better. More points is good.
Yes, higher number usually wins. Wow, that's crazy. All right, that's enough bashing of silly. I'm sure there's some legal team that made them put that there for some reason. There's probably a lawsuit pending somewhere, and we can blame lawyers. Damn you, lawyers. But enough. That's enough for one night. Enough combine chatter. Enough LA news. Enough mock draft mocking. So no more mocking of my mock. Next time, we will mock your mock. And for the listeners out there, we'll be doing another update to our podcast, probably around the first weekend of free agency, and then we'll have a pre and post draft mock draft or podcast. We'll also have a schedule release mock draft, and of course the Vegas over under podcast after the over unders are released by Vegas. So pay attention to those, and if anything else warrants a podcast, we will podcast away and tweet it out. So watch your Twitter feeds and definitely check us out at steelscorpionsports.com, a better species of fantasy football. You can go out there and learn more about our games, learn about the multiplier, the mulligan, and the all-play format, and find out why we think we are a better species of fantasy football. So please take the time to do that, listen to the podcasts, and pay attention to your Twitter feed, because we will be giving tidbits out all off-season long, because the NFL never sleeps, Mark.
It's not.
With that, I will sign off from San Diego. This is Jeff Miller.
Signing off from San Jose. It's Mark Huffman.
Talk to you later, sports fans.